Whenever rain hits the patio roof hard enough to drown out my own breathing, I remember the eyes staring through the fence just a few months ago and how I learned that a locked door means nothing at all. It was October. The rain fell in pounding sheets, turning the street into a rippling gray mirror under the glow of the street lamps. It had been raining so much I noticed my moods had been changing a lot. Inside, my house smelled faintly of coffee and damp wood. Pools of warm lamplight spilled across the floor. Outside, the gutters overflowed, pouring rainwater in shimmering curtains along the edges of the roof. I was on the couch. The TV was on in the background, just for noise, when I noticed a shape by the fence. It had just caught my attention randomly, and honestly, I'm glad I caught it when I did. At first, I thought it was my neighbor's trash bin tipped over. The rain plays tricks, turning shadows into taller shapes, but then it leaned forward, closer to the gaps between the slats. I turned off the TV and stayed still, watching. That's when a face pressed into view. You cannot make this up. One pale eye glistened under the patio light, framed by wet hair sticking to the wood. A man's voice rose over the storm, kind of faded.
Hey, you got a dog?
I stayed seated. I told the man to leave, but he was refusing. He tilted his head, closer now, water dripping from his chin onto the fence. At this moment, I was beginning to tremble, knowing something was not right. Good. You mind if I come around? I pushed off the couch and backed toward the kitchen. Stay where you are. I just said to leave. His breathing quickened. Raindrops fell from his raincoat in tiny rivulets. I could tell he was getting angry, and my suspicion had never been wrong in unfamiliar situations. Don't be like that. I'm just stuck out here. Been out here a while. I closed my fist around the edge of the kitchen counter. The rain was relentless, drumming so hard on the patio roof it sounded like static. You don't know me. Go away. I was getting sick of tired of saying the same thing. He just stood there frozen like a character on a video game when the controller dies. I slipped to the back door and turned the deadbolt until it clicked. Then I shut off every light in the house and crouched near the bedroom window, peeking through a thin gap in the curtains. The yard looked empty. A minute later, gravel crunched along the side of the house. I ducked lower as I felt my heart skip multiple beats. Soft tapping echoed through the kitchen. Tap, tap, tap. Sound for it. I eased forward just enough to see into the kitchen. He stood under the patio roof, water streaming off his jacket, his hand flat against the glass, leaving streaks of rain. Come on, he said. I just want to dry off a minute. You're being rude. My phone was on the coffee table in the living room. I crawled toward it, moving slow, trying not to shift the floorboards. This guy was demonstrating dangerous behavior, so I knew I needed to act before it was too late. When I looked up again, the patio was empty. Where could he have gone? This type of vanishing was something straight out of a Halloween movie. I had seen movies like this. The bad guy doesn't just go away on his own. Then the back door rattled on its hinges, followed by a sharp crack of wood splitting. I scrambled to my bedroom and locked the door. A second later, the sound of the door frame splintering reached me like a bone snapping. Something heavy moved across the tiles. I squeezed into the narrow gap beside my bed and dialed 911, gripping the phone so tightly my fingers hurt. Water kept leaking from the gutters outside, pouring onto the patio in steady streams, and just beneath the rain's endless roar, I heard footsteps moving closer down the hallway. I should have called the police sooner. He was in the house. "3 years ago, a storm rolled in fierce and sudden. thunder booming so loud it rattled plates in the cabinets. Lightning kept flashing like a strobe, spilling quick glimpses of the hallway beyond my door. Now, whenever rain lashes the windows and wind claws at the siding, the memory crawls back. I find myself pausing mid-step, straining to hear breaths that don't belong to me, half convinced the house is waiting to reveal what else it's been hiding. I've never told anyone the whole story until now, not even my parents or best friend. I guess I finally worked up the nerve to say it out loud. So, here we go. That night, the rain was pouring so hard it was bouncing off the pavement like sparks. I was alone. I had planned to spend some time with an old friend from school that evening, but plans suddenly changed, and not on purpose. Inside, everything felt warm and bright. My house smelled of damp leaves mixed with the faint sweetness of vanilla from a candle I'd lit in the kitchen. The gutters outside gurgled constantly, like someone whispering just out of earshot. I'd just gotten home from a late shift, shoes squelching water onto the tile. All I wanted was dry clothes and hot tea. You know how demanding work can be. So I hung my wet coat on a hook by the door, kicked off my soaked sneakers, and set the kettle to boil. I decided to put on some music as I always did. Justin Timberlake was my go-to. While the water heated, I walked down the hallway to grab clean clothes. Halfway there, I noticed the hall closet door was cracked open an inch. I never leave that door open because it creaks like crazy. I brushed it off, figuring maybe the storm rattled it loose. 10 minutes later, wearing dry sweats and holding my mug, I settled on the couch. I flicked on the TV just for background noise and let myself relax. Rain drummed the roof so hard it sounded like popcorn popping. Somewhere around the second commercial break, I thought I heard movement, a faint shuffling coming from the hallway. I muted the TV and held my breath. This was beginning to make me think I was going crazy. The house went silent except for the storm. I waited, straining to listen, but heard nothing else. A while later, I stood up to put my mug in the sink. That's when I noticed a few small things that was not normal and wasn't by my doing. First, the hall closet door was open again, just a few inches. Second, a faint draft of cool air seeped into the hallway, carrying a smell that didn't belong, stale sweat mixed with old wood. This wasn't normal. At this very moment, I knew something was wrong, and honestly, a part of me didn't want to know what was truly going on. I stepped closer and flicked on the closet light. Everything looked normal at first glance. Coats hanging, shoes lined up. But then I noticed the small square attic hatch at the top of the closet was shifted about half an inch out of place. I wished I hadn't been alone at this moment, wishing I had a friend, girlfriend, family member, just someone. I wanted to throw up and felt like I was going to pass out then and there. Trying to shake it off, I went to the bathroom to splash water on my face. I leaned over the sink and stared at the drain, feeling ridiculous for freaking myself out. When I straightened up and looked in the mirror, my own reflection startled me. My eyes were wide, shoulders tense like I was waiting for someone to grab me from behind. Panic was setting in. I'm talking in scared for my life panic. I turned off the bathroom light and headed back down the hallway. That's when I knew I was in immediate danger. A soft sound was coming from the ceiling above the hallway. It wasn't rain. It was something moving, a tiny shift of weight, like knees sliding across wood. My eyes traced the ceiling lines to the spot directly over the closet. I felt the walls pressing closer around me. The thought hit me all at once. Someone's in my attic. In this exact moment, there were so many thoughts running through my head, I had to stop and think, and quickly, I backed away slowly and slipped into the kitchen. I grabbed my phone and dialed the non-emergency police number, trying to keep my voice steady. While I waited on hold, I stood there in the bright kitchen light, staring down the dark hallway. Rain pounded the windows like frantic fingers. The operator finally picked up, and I explained everything in a rush. She stayed on the line while officers were dispatched. About 10 minutes later, I heard a sudden knock on my front door. 2 cops in rain-slick jackets stood under the porch light, water streaming off their hats. One held a flashlight, the other a hand resting near his belt. They listened carefully to what I'd heard and said they'd check it out. I stood behind them as they opened the closet and pushed the attic hatch open. One officer shone his light into the crawl space and climbed up, while the other stayed below, glancing back at me every few seconds. A few minutes passed before the cop in the attic called out, "Got something up here." They brought down an old rolled-up sleeping bag, a few crumpled snack wrappers, 2 half-empty water bottles, and a small spiral notebook with pages full of neat handwriting. Inside the notebook were dates, times, and notes. He leaves at 7:45 most mornings. He sleeps with her bedroom door unlocked. He keeps a spare key under the second flower pot. I had been watched, but more importantly, taken advantage of. Feeling violated, and I'm not even sure that's the correct word to describe how I actually feel about this. The officers said whoever it was had probably been coming down during the day while I was at work, showering, eating small amounts of food, living like a ghost just out of sight, a true squatter, or maybe even worse. For all I know, he could have been plotting to seriously hurt me. We don't know. But what's worse is that they didn't find anyone up there that night. The attic was empty. No footprints leading out in the rain. No sign of where he'd gone. I had heard stories of people that had similar type situations happen to them, but of course I never thought it would happen to me. To this day, I still check the attic hatch twice before going to bed, especially when storms roll in. Because every time the rain batters the house, I wonder if he's still up there, waiting for me to let my guard down again. I am close to being able to afford to move to a different location. Couldn't come soon enough,